I'm Elizabeth at A Literary Princess, and today I have part 3 of my underrated Victorian literature series. So in this series, I pick 3 books from Victorian literature that I think deserve more attention than they are currently getting, and most of these come from my reading exam lists, and once again, these 3 are on my reading exam lists. But I actually knew about 2 of them well before that and had read both of them before for classes in my undergrad and my master's program. So let's jump right in. First up, we have The Romance of a Shop by Amy Levy. So this follows the 4 Lorimer sisters, Gertrude, Lucy, Phyllis, and Fanny, whose father dies, and upon his death, they decide that they are going to follow in his footsteps and open a photography business, despite protests from some of their more conservative family members. So, this is a New Woman novel. Amy Levy was considered a New Woman writer. She was in the circle of Olive Schreiner, who wrote The Story of an African Farm. And she was also, interestingly, a Jewish woman. This book does not deal with Jewish identity, but her other book, Reuben Sachs, does. I've not read that, but I've heard good things about it. So, this book is great. The sisters are all very different, and they each have their own arc of, plot arc of things that happen. And it's sad, it's heartwarming, and it's just interesting to see how a woman in 1888, I believe this was published, could try to make her own way in the world, even when it was frowned upon. So this is taking part in a conversation about women entering the workforce, what professions should be allowed to them, should they be allowed to go out in the city in public. This takes place in a city. Gertrude, who's kind of our main sister for the whole book, is constantly going out on walking and on the omnibuses, which her conservative relatives do not approve of. They think she shouldn't be out without a chaperone. And it's just great. And it ultimately, we see some of the consequences of what happens when we don't provide women with a way to direct themselves and have something to do with one of the sisters. I'm not going to spoil anything more, but this is a lovely book. It's nice and short and very well written and very enjoyable. All right, next up is one by an author you're probably all sick of hearing me talk about because I talk about her constantly. This is Phoebe Jr. by Margaret Oliphant. Margaret Oliphant has featured in every one of my videos for this series so far, but this is actually the last one I've read by her, so this might be the last one for a while. Phoebe Jr. follows the story really of 2 women. We have Phoebe, who is a young woman whose parents are dissenters, and she goes to stay with her grandparents in the town of Carlingford. Her grandfather owned a shop, but has since become so successful that he has moved into kind of the high class neighborhood. And then we have the Anglican minister's daughter. Oh my God, what is her name? Ursula May, who becomes friends with Phoebe, and there is this tension regarding the religions and the various men in their families and the 2 spending time together, whether that's appropriate, which is very interesting. There is a lot about money in this book and how it's necessary, how it can drive people to do things that are not so great, and how also sometimes we make our big life decisions around money, marrying for money, for instance. So this has a lot to say about women's position and how they can influence some of these bigger social structures that we usually think of Victorian women not being able to influence. So Miss Marchbanks did that with politics. This really does this with religion. And it's great, well written. Again, short. All of the books I have for you today are short. Yay! And this is just so good. All right, and last we have an author who I'm going to say their name like Elizabeth. That's not underrated. He is not an underrated man by any stretch of the imagination. But I think this book in particular does not get nearly enough attention than some of this author's other works. I only know about it because I had to read it my sophomore year of college. One of my professors assigned it. This is Hard Times by Charles Dickens. This book is fantastic. I don't know why I never hear anyone talking about Hard Times, because this is the tightest of any of Dickens' novels that I have read. Is it technically his best? Maybe not, but craft-wise, like plotting and just having the plot beats, getting to the point, portraying the characters, this is fantastic. Short. Whoever associated Dickens with short? Nobody. He liked to talk. Anyway, this tells the story of Thomas Gradgrind, who is the superintendent of this school in Coketown, which is a northern mill town. And he has this vision of education that only teaches children the facts. There is no imagination, there is no wishing, wondering, none of that. Facts only. Does not leave room for emotion, anything. Just facts, logic, reason. And this is how he has raised his two children, Tom Gradgrind Jr. and his daughter Louisa. And this is what he is imposing on these children at this school. So we follow his children and one of his students, Sissy Jupe, who was the daughter of a circus member whose father abandons her. This is not a spoiler, it happens really early on. And who ends up being brought up in the Gradgrind household. And we see the consequences of this method of bringing up and how this is not a good thing. Both of his children suffer because of it. Sissy manages to escape it because she had her early life with this circus. So she knows all about kind of wonder and imagination and enjoyment and emotion. Whereas Tom and Louisa have just been taught facts. Their mother says that they've been instructed in every kind of ology that exists, but it turns out Louisa's emotional knowledge is basically at zero and nearly has devastating consequences for her upon her marriage to a friend of her father's, Mr. Bounderby, who seems to own both a mill and a bank. I was a little confused on that point, even upon rereading it. I just finished this, or I guess it was last week now. And then this story also intersects with the story of Stephen Blackpool, who works in Mr. Bounderby's mill. So, this has a lot to say about the Industrial Revolution, a lot to say about education, what children need to grow up into like functioning members of society who are capable of empathy and making good decisions. I think this is fantastic. I think everyone should go read Hard Times. If you're thinking, maybe I'll pick up something by Dickens, this also might be a great place to start because it is so short. I read this in, I think, 2 days. And it was a reread, but still. My copy is like 299 pages with notes. So, very short, very good, really well done on Dickens' part. All right, so those are my 3 underrated Victorian novels for you. Let me know down in the comments below, have you read any of these? What do you think? What Victorian novels do you think are underrated? It has been great chatting with you all. I will see you soon. Bye.